Hello, hello, and welcome back to Call Your Coven. I am so happy to be here. I'm Bee, my pronouns are she, her, and I am the numerologist of the coven.
I'm Jeanna, my pronouns are also she, her, and I am your resident astrologer.
And I'm Meg, my pronouns are she, they, and I am the Coven's tarot reader.
Yes. And first of all, we just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who listened to our last episode, our conversation on chronic illness and magic and creativity and spirituality. We received so much affirming feedback and validation that this kind of conversation is prevalent and needed in at least our coven and our communities. So thank you. That was really validating for all of us.
Yeah, truly.
Also good to know that occasionally we can break structure and just shoot the shit and folks will jam with it.
100%.
Yeah. Hell yeah. And we did ask, like, if you like this format, let us know, but we are going to force another one on you in March
100%.
anyway.
We're just actually going to do it. So
yes. But yeah, that'll be cool. And we're excited to have other conversations.
Yeah.
And yeah, today we're going to talk about March 2025, which it feels like a month that at least, and Jeanna, you can say more on this, but it feels like astrologers have been preparing us for March 2025 for like years. And so now that it's here, I don't know what to do with it.
It's got big, like, hurry up and stop energy, honestly, is how I feel about March, which I will get into later. But, like, yeah, March is when we really start to kick off with some major changes astrologically for the year that make 2025 like once in a century kind of astrology because of how many planets are changing signs. And I know that I feel like we say buckle up bitches every single month, but this month is just buckle up bitches. Like, it's busy.
Yeah. And I feel similarly about the numerology of the month. It's interesting. I was thinking about what you said last month, Jeanna, about the astrology totally changing from beginning of the year to end of the year.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting to have a 9-year, which means that we really are just experiencing the building block numbers in and of themselves, all these versions of energies under the umbrella of each number. And so it's fascinating to see the numerology be like, no, we should take it back to basics and we should get really comfy with these core energies because the planets, they're going to do a ton of stuff, but like here, boots on the ground, in the digits, we're going to keep it really straightforward. And that being said, I'm going to talk a lot about trickster magic in the numerology of the month. So not so straightforward.
No, it does really feel like we've been preparing for these seismic shifts. And I think it's really interesting to think about 9 as like the overarching energy. But yeah, the tarot in the same way is kind of like, here are some gentle things you can do. Here are some like practical things you can do. Here are some ways you can breathe and take it one day at a time. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of where we all are. So
yeah. Okay, let's dive in. Let's see what's going on. Okay, March 2025. What a month. So March is the 3rd month. And then, of course, in the 9-year, we add 3 to 9 and we get to 12, which I always do look at 12. It's not a double digit, but it is a number that culturally, we've talked about this before, culturally, we just have a lot to say about 12. And, 12 is a dozen. There's 12 months in a year, 12 signs of the zodiac. Like, we understand that. But at the root of it, March is definitely a 3-month. And so I think both these energies in the 12 and in the 3 do give it a little interesting flavor. So some call 3 the magic number, which of course I love for witches. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to make magic this month. It is also connected to the witch deity Hecate, which, Meg, you have a great way of saying her name. Please say it.
I say Agate because I attended this Agate thing one time and they talked about Greek translations and pronunciations, and that's what they said was the most like potentially accurate pronunciation. So now that's how I say it. But also there are tons of ways to pronounce it, including the Shakespearean way and all these other ways. But the Agate is the way that I was told by someone who speaks Greek to say it. So that's how I
And I was going to say the Shakespearean is Hecate, and that's almost always what I say. But yeah, there are a million.
She's so old that I think it's like, yeah, whatever you're going to say is what you're going to say.
Whatever you want to call her.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I mean that with the utmost respect, but it's like I think, yeah, she has such a long and complex and beautiful history that I think there's lots of ways to say her name, and I don't think it's necessarily bad to say one over another. So,
okay, before we go further, I do have a very small dog boy who wants to be involved.
Of course.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Baby. Hi, Gus.
If you're watching on YouTube, this is Gus. He's very annoying, but he's very sweet.
He is your child. He is your biological son.
I birthed him before I had my uterus removed.
Yes.
It's really interesting that we're talking about this pronunciation and all these different variations of Hecate or Hagate or Hecate, however you want to say her name, because I do think that really kind of encompasses some of the trickster magic that I was feeling into in regards to the energy of March in 2025. So, Hagate is often called the triple goddess. So she's inherently vibes with the number 3. And also, I didn't know this, but we tend to think about a crossroads as 2 roads, but actually there's a lot of historical and witchy writings to say that a crossroads is actually 3 different paths coming together. So that changes a lot about how you would leave offerings or where you would actually go to commune with a goddess deity like Hecate. And also, we are vibing with the Greek messenger god Hermes in all of his forms in March via the legendary figure of Hermes Trismegistus, which is a combination of Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, who is the god of writing, wisdom, and magic. So this all feels very in line with 3 energy, the communicator. And Hermes Trismegistus literally means Hermes the thrice greatest. So there's all of this 3 energy and deities, Hecate and Hermes have come forward, but figure out there's a lot of like deity practice available to us this month, which I think is really neat. Now, if you watched our conversation, you'll also know that I've been working with another trickster deity, Loki, who was blowing out candles for me last time. And so just through my own experiences and then in sitting with 3 energy, like I said before, March 2025 is going to bring a lot of trickster magic. And something to keep in mind about this is that everything does have a cost. And I think we've lived a lot of life really being able to ignore the quote unquote cost of living. And at this point, it doesn't even matter that the cost of living is a horrible phrase, because there is a cost and we have been paying it. But I think especially in Western culture, in colonial countries like the United States, we haven't really noticed it. We haven't had to come face to face with what the cost of our lives and our lifestyle really is. So it's like the little treat that we actually ignore. The little treat is bliss that ignorance buys. But it's becoming increasingly hard to be ignorant, and especially hard to be willfully ignorant. And I think now it's also becoming increasingly dangerous and unethical, immoral, all those things, to be still willfully ignorant and at least not ready to look what the exchange that you're making in the eyeballs. So I think we've also experienced a lot of privilege in the types of pushback that our protests and our movements have garnered. When I think about 3 and 3 being a very active kind of volcanic energy, I do think of protest and I do think of movements where you're literally throwing your voice towards a cause. And I think we feel really safe to raise hell. But there are plenty of people on earth who are telling a really different story about protest and about resistance. And so time is this very strange, loose concept But I think we're already starting to see in 2025 with all of this 9 ending energy that things are happening really quickly. Endings, it is one moment they're like this, and the next moment there's a headline and it's like that. So our concept of reality and the beliefs that we hold and that we've relied on really are in shapeshifter mode right now. I think we can look back to 2020 as that year being both a death. It was a 4 year, and death is a 4 card as well in the tarot. It was a death and an initiation. And so collectively in a numerological cycle, we were heading towards the middle of our 9-year cycle. But I do think that 2020 was also kind of a beginning in and of itself, because it was the end of things the way that we knew them. We saw whole structures and systems shift and change overnight. It was really deus ex machina of things, like things shifting shape all around the world in this incredibly swift fashion. And so then here in 2025, while we're at the end of a collective cycle, we're kind of more in the middle of whatever the fuck it was that started in 2020. So, practical advice for March: be really aware of what kinds of magic you are doing in March, especially if you have a really broad definition of magic. Like Meg shared, everything I do is magical. Then you might have to think like everything I do is magical, and therefore I must think about everything I'm doing. Actions really do have consequences in the current timeline. And I think that's only going to become more pronounced and experienced and felt as we venture further into the year. And one thing that came through to remember is that unfortunately, consequences are not the same as accountability. And victims pay for the sins of their abusers every day. So this is kind of like bad things happen to good people vibes, like watch your step, mean what you say, be really open to swift, equal, and opposite reactions. Also, on that point, if you can't do magic with your whole chest, if there are questions, if you're like, I don't know if I want to throw my weight behind that, save it for another month. Write it down, save yourself a voice memo, communicate it to a friend, whatever works for you, but let it gestate. Put it into your art, channel and express in a way that brings nourishment, connection, and calls to action. But really remember, like, stupid people play stupid games, and we're not interested in being a stupid person this month, especially when our numbers are 12 and 3. So I think that hanged one energy of 12 is going to leave some things hanging in the balance in March. 3 really feels like fire, at least to me, it feels like a fiery number. But really, it's a mental number. So we're going to watch out for overthinking. We're watching ourselves if we're indulging in painful thought loops. And then also really know that health is a cyclical process. It's sporadic. So I do think March actually might be activating. I'm going to talk about this in health, but March might be really activating for mental health. So you just want to continue that nervous system work that we were doing in February to hold you through March. So my final thoughts: we're reorienting the mind. Absurd times call for out of the box thinking. So this is very, make your magic, gather with your people, trust your genius, fight the power. The phrase, the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible, came through big time, which is a quote by Tony Cade Bambara, who's an incredible activist and filmmaker. Yeah, I think it's going to be a juicy month, but it definitely has the vibe of like doing something and immediately getting a kickback. And then you might have to do that a few times to be like, oh gosh, I don't want the kickback. I better just not do the thing. But yeah, I'm curious to see how this vibes with the astrology and the tarot, because this felt like big kind of like be careful energy in a way, but also one that's like, if you have something to say, do it now.
Yeah, that's really consistent with a lot of the astrology. I will say I was writing down notes furiously while you were talking, B, because like, I don't know, when you started talking about Hecate, it was just so striking to me, like how many religions have Trinity gods. Like not just Christianity, though that's a really prominent one, but like there are multiple trinities within Hinduism, within Greek mythology. You've got all kinds of groups of three women or femme-coded beings, like the three Graces and the Moirae, who are also the Fates, or the Horae, who are the Seasons. I'm probably mispronouncing those things. So it's really, yeah, it's just really striking to me how many of those Trinity beings are associated, like you were saying, with the life and death, or like death and resurrection cycle. Really striking. Yeah. So diving into the astrology with the three in mind, I know I've been saying for months now that Q1 is slow, and here we are at the end of Q1. Unbelievable. And March is a very big month astrologically, you know, like we said at the top. And it's very interesting, B, to hear you talk about the like, you'll do something, but there might be a kickback. So make sure you're doing it with your full chest or just sit on it, because Mars is finally direct this month in March. Thank fuck. So we are getting some of our energy and motivation and like ability to make moves back. But we are then confronted with a different kind of slow, the whole like, things are starting to move, but they look different than we expected. Things are starting to move, but not in the way we anticipated. So we have to adjust. And because this month we have Venus and Mercury retrogrades happening, the first of the year. And then we have the first eclipse season of 2025. And Neptune is changing signs for the first time in almost 15 years. So it's so much.
All potatoes.
All the things. So how we think about desire and how we want to communicate what we want, it's very much up for review in March. Like this energy this month really reminded me, when I was sitting with it, of like the dog that caught the car. Like Gus, you were saying, Gus, perfect, beautiful little trickster. He could chase a car, but what the fuck would he do if he got it? Like he wouldn't know what to do. And it has very big, like, okay, you got what you wanted, you got what you were going after, but do you know what to do with it? Do you even still want that thing? And Venus, I say this because Venus is ultimately about desire. You know, you hear a lot of keywords get thrown out for Venus: love, relationships, connection, all of that. And that's true, but that's all basically under the very lubricated umbrella, if you will, of desire. And what do we want? And how do we direct those desires? And then with Mercury, trickster, again, like trickster god also of the, in terms, it's so interesting that you led with Hecate. B, I can't, because it's like Mercury is also very closely associated with Hecate, because Mercury is the psychopomp who can go between, who can sometimes act as a messenger to the underworld from her. So yeah, my brain is exploding right now. Mercury is about communication, right? As the planet, it's primarily about communication, commerce, also how we travel, also how we then take those journeys to share and disperse the information that we've collected. And so I think that on a collective, broader level, I think we are definitely going to see a lot of major headlines this month around women and queer folks and reproductive health, and also in the very technology travel way, how information is shared. Like right now, you know, Meg and I live in New York City. And right now, our governor, who I have very complicated feelings about, most of which are negative, but she is doing like this one good thing around really digging in on making New York a sanctuary state and not allowing extradition of abortion medication providers here to other states. And that to me is a very straight up like Mercury and Venus retrograde kind of story. This is also a really big month creatively, like whether for folks who are working artists, just for folks who have a creative practice, you know, you like to crochet in front of the TV, you make sweaters for all the pets in your life. Since Venus and Mercury are the two planets that most directly govern culture, art making, writing, crafts, things like that. Both the Venus and Mercury retrogrades also start in like feisty, let's fight on the front lines, Pussy Riot, Act Up, Aries, and then they will retrograde back into the whole we are all one consciousness that feels like a Hosier and Florence and the Machine music festival. So Venus stations retro, to give people the actual dates for their calendar for when these things are happening, Venus stations retrograde on March 1st, and then we'll backtrack into Pisces on March 27th. Mercury stations retrograde on March 15th, also stationing in Aries, and then we'll backtrack into Pisces on March 29th. So also, if you experience a tonal shift in how you work in March, will be very unsurprising to me personally. Like if folks are really getting after it in the first half of the month, and then they're like getting high and making playlists and dreaming in a bubble bath about their work in the second half of the month, yes, that feels. And the fact that these two big retrogrades are toggling between the signs that Neptune is transiting this month, it's just very loud to me. Both Venus retrograde in Pisces and Mercury retrograde, also in Pisces, will make one last conjunction to Neptune in Pisces, like right before Neptune changes signs. The Venus Neptune conjunction, which I'll also talk about later in the Love Cauldron, is on March 27th. And then the Mercury Neptune conjunction is March 29th. And to me, these moments really link the retrograde exploration of what do we want? What do we desire? How do we think about what we want? What do you want to be making to that Neptunian dream? Which itself is changing signs. And so also then changing our collective orientation. Neptune has been in Pisces since 2012 with some like of the in and out retrograde back and forth between Aquarius and Pisces in 2011. So that the planet's last conversations with Venus and Mercury really provide a space to reflect on how your desire, your pleasure, your art making, your communication skills have shifted in the last 14 years. And to just share with folks, like for me personally, I got married to my ex-husband in 2011 under Neptune and Pisces. I proceeded to shortly after have a complete death and rebirth experience of coming out, leaving the church, getting divorced. I talk about all of that in my memoir, Heretic. And then I was with women and carving my own path spiritually and moving to New York and pursuing writing full time and accidentally becoming an astrologer and falling in love with my best friend and marrying them. Like for me, Neptune and Pisces, hilariously, is bookended with my two marriages. But like the reasons and the desire underneath them, the ideals underneath them were completely different. Like I was a completely different person at the beginning and end of that transit. So I want to encourage folks here at the beginning of March to reflect on what the last 14 years have looked like for you in regards to your spirituality, but also just in regards to your beliefs and your ideals and how those things undergird and inform your everyday decision making. Like how has what you idealized or strived toward changed? How has your relationship to boundaries changed? Perhaps boundaries around desire, pleasure, or communication. Neptune is so porous, and when it's activating something in our chart, we can easily get overwhelmed by everyone else's hopes and dreams and sort of sacrifice our own. But what have we learned here at the end? Like, what are we clarifying? Neptune is going to do a little retrograde dance back into Pisces later this year, but this initiation really does kick off at the end of March. And I think it's very, very telling that the eclipses are like a footnote after all of that.
Really?
How busy this month is with these major, major retrogrades, both of which deeply connect to Neptune's transit. And also we're having eclipses. So the total lunar eclipse, which is the full moon eclipse, comes mid-month on March 14th. And then we have a partial solar eclipse or the new moon eclipse in Aries on March 29th. I've done a whole episode on the significance, the meaning of eclipses here at Chronic Coven. So just like scroll back in the episode list for your own listening pleasure. And we're going to get a little more into the eclipses in the cauldrons later in the episode and what that means for specific rising signs. But yeah, guys, TLDR, March is real busy and also like very new. Yeah, very big that like meeting at the Ouroboros. How the fuck do you say that? I always read it. I never say it because it's hard to say. But like it's really the snake like eating its tail, the infinity symbol. Like to me, 3 is big, like the beginning is the end is the beginning. And that's very much what the astrology is.
Yeah. Can I say one thing before we move to
Yeah, I
tarot?
was going to ask if you want to say anything before I start talking.
I do. I have a lot of thoughts, but I think the eclipses are kind of what I was keying into about how this month could have time jumps or like
Yes.
endings happen really quickly. Like one moment it's this, one moment it's that. And I actually think that I don't subscribe to any like fear eclipse
Yeah.
season vibes, like that's just not me. But I think this is one of the rare moments where the eclipses will actually help us out.
Yeah.
Because if you can stay detached enough to see a swift ending as rejection is protection or
Mhm.
redirection is protection,
Yeah.
then I think the eclipses could be really supportive in the long run if we can like ignore the sting in the short run of like something coming to completion that we weren't ready for. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting.
I think this is all really interesting in light of the theme card that I pulled for us for this month, because the theme card that I pulled is Temperance, which is card 14 and it's a 5 card. And obviously 5 and 3 are not the same number, but I think in terms of like thinking about redirection, like B always calls it the messy middle, which I love. I like to think about it like a hinge, like we're
Mm.
literally reorienting ourselves in a new direction, which requires some friction, requires some mess, requires some recalibration, but it's really about taking the information that we have and the experiences that we've had and letting ourselves start to learn from them. And so thinking about March as this month where there's so many big transits happening and the way that that's shifting the ground under our feet in a lot of ways, and we're really thinking about where we've been and where we now want to go in light of that information. I think Temperance is a really nice kind of summary of that in certain ways. So just as a general note, if this is the first time you're hearing the forecast, the theme cards that I always pull for us are not predictive. They're very like, what's the vibe of the month? And so Temperance, I think, can be a really sticky archetype for people. I think it's one of those cards that people are like, what the fuck does this mean? How am I supposed to figure this out? The keywords that often get associated with it are like alchemy and moderation and luck. And it's like, what the hell are we even talking about? So I want to talk about Temperance as having a lot of different potential meanings, but I want to remind you that it lives in the strange liminal space between death and the devil. So of course it feels weird and uncomfortable and hard to pin down. We're coming off of death, of a loss, of a change, of a right? Of a boundary that's been set that we perhaps did not have control over. And now we are in the strange rebirth adjustment period where we're starting to rub up against things that might feel uncomfortable or challenging to us, or being forced to start thinking about what we are craving that we can't have, or what we're overly prioritizing and getting lost in, or where we're craving freedom or rebellion or breaking some rules or making some new rules. The devil also has a lot of potential meanings. This is one of my favorite sections of the tarot because it's messy as fuck. But I think Temperance is really, you can boil it down to a lot of things, but I want you to really think about it for this month as an important internal shift or a new awareness. You can think of Temperance like an illumination or like an embracing of contradiction, or like Jeanna was talking about in our forecast, I think it was last month, the next step in an alchemical process where things are literally changing form, but in the moment it looks messy and weird and there's clearly magic at work, but we don't necessarily know what it's going to turn into or what it's going to become or what we're going to be on the other side of that shift. Temperance can often be about things or choices or feelings or discoveries that don't make logical sense, but still clearly have power and magic and impact anyway. And they're impacting us on an internal level. So as a 5 card, Temperance can teach us about what it means to let the universe tug us in a new direction, even if we don't feel like we're necessarily choosing it, to rely on the unknown in a way that might feel really out of the box or unfamiliar or uncomfortable. And also honoring the things that we do when we're allowing ourselves to be authentic instead of just trying to force ourselves to be something that we're not. I think Temperance can really push us into that uncomfortable recognition of what we actually want and who we actually are versus what we're used to wanting or who we're used to showing up as. the aftermath of death is rebirth. And Temperance, and I want to call out that I actually used the Slutist Tarot for this particular reading, the Slutist deck, which I believe is out of print, but if you can get a used copy, it rules. It's really cool. But it's literally a figure shaking out wings, like shaking out their angel's wings, so to speak. And so I was thinking about Temperance as letting our wings stretch out and dry after emerging from the cocoon, adjusting to the weight of them and the feeling of being in a new body, preparing for that first flight. And knowing that that first flight, that first time that we're trusting our wings might be shaky and scary and messy and even result in a small crash of some kind. But between the excitement and fear is something that's really true. This hunger for movement, this like rawness and realness of desire and anticipation and hope for something different. So as a theme for the month, Temperance feels like it's really calling us to stop apologizing for our mess. That's kind of the phrase that was coming forward for me, to stop apologizing for things that we are learning and unlearning in real time, as well as for the fact, like not apologizing for the fact that our work and ourselves are not finished yet. That's fine. And instead to embrace the transitional process and the liminal knowledge that we are still acquiring. What would it feel like to celebrate your process instead of wishing away the journey and just like wishing you were at the end already? So I also always pull a truth card and a dare card, and they're both for everybody. You don't have to pick one or the other, but truth is really about an internal challenge, something to think about, something to ponder, a way to attack yourself, so to speak, if you're into that sort of thing. Um, and for March, I actually pulled the Knight of Coins. I mentioned that I had another 3 card, and I read knights as 3s because I think of them as the 12th card of the suit. 1 + 2 = 3. So the Knight of Coins or the Knight of Pentacles can be, again, a lot of things, but I like to think of this card as an invitation to look up from the careful forward progress that we're making. Like we're moving towards the finish line, but I often think of the Knight of Coins as being really focused on the physical movement of each step. And instead enjoying the movement and like looking up and taking in the shifting horizons and the changing environment and the progress that we are making. And as a truth card in particular, what really felt relevant this month is that this figure could be encouraging us to pay attention to our bodies, to learning to listen to what our bodies know and to what our bodies can teach us. Coins and pentacles can be all kinds of things. And I think it's easy to kind of fall into the habit of just thinking about them as money. But more and more, I'm really thinking about pentacles and coins as our physical self and our embodied experience and the way that we live in the world on a daily basis. So this could be a month for really thinking about your physical limits and your physical dreams, for the ways that you care for your body and how you learned to care about your body and about yourself in this particular way. How did you learn to take care of this body that you live in, of this particular vessel that you inhabit? Who taught you to do that? And is it still working? Does it still feel good? Does that method of care work for you, or is it just what you're familiar with? What is your body longing for? And how can you give yourself the resources that you need to feel good and safe and comfortable and satisfied in your physical body? What power does your body hold? And what would it feel like to really reckon with that in an honest, open way? I think thinking about bodies, I was just thinking so much about our Chronic Coven conversation because it just felt so relevant for this, thinking about how we can love our bodies in ways that reflect who our bodies actually are or what our bodies actually are, instead of wishing that they were different, right? Our bodies are our bodies for better or worse. So how can we tend that particular vessel? How can we challenge our perceptions about our bodies? What would it look like to be really truthful with ourselves about our relationship with our bodies? And how could spending time thinking through your resources and capacity and needs help you take more honest care of your physical form? There's a lot I could say about the Knight of Pentacles, but that was kind of what was bubbling up this month, is really thinking about bodies. And then lastly, speaking of doing things with your whole chest, for our dare card, I pulled the Tower, which I think is kind of great, actually. I love the Tower as a dare card because it really just feels like a call to shit or get off the pot. Like, as you were saying, like, do a thing. If you're going to do a thing, do it with your whole chest. And that's really what the dare is about. It's an external challenge. It's a risk to consider. It's a place to consider pushing yourself. And the Tower really is like, it's time to risk it all, baby, sort of thing. Like, we're leaving behind things that are broken. We're making moves to break free or break away. from something that we know isn't working.
Mhm.
I was thinking about beckoning adventure and a major change that perhaps has been simmering in the background, just waiting for you to embrace it. What freedom is calling? What has been calling? And what would it take for you to actually chase after it this month? Where are you finally ready to make a major move? I think about the Tower as a dare specifically. Like, if you think about pulling this card as advice in your reading, it's really take control of the narrative, be brave as fuck, and find and claim your power, even if you don't know how it will all turn out, or even if you don't feel like you can control exactly what's going to happen next. Where have you been stuck? And how can you shake loose of those bindings? What cracks in the foundation have you been kind of noticing and ignoring? And what would it feel like to seek out new footing instead of continuing to ignore those seismic shifts? In other words, this month, what would it look like to do something truly daring? What does that mean for you, and how might it feel? Just very chill cards as ever. March is marching.
That last thing you said, Meg, with the tower, that really reminded me of a phrase that has been in the culture because of our current president and also our current pseudo president, Musk.
Yeah.
But the Silicon Valley ethos, right? Like move fast and break things.
Yeah.
And that, I feel like part of the reason that's been so effective, not to get too much into politics here, but part of the reason that's been so effective is because the right has been willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, especially with the tower and some things we was saying and eclipse season, it's like, okay, do it back. Like equal and opposite reaction. Like move fast and break things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then allow for things to be broken. I think that that's like, none of us want to live in the messy middle, you know, like none of us.
No.
And as somebody who has a lot of 5 energy, and Jeanna does as well, and my wife does as well, like it's not fun to live in that energy for very long. And I think we want stability and we want safety and we want to comprehend and understand things. And so we as a people, we're just not very good at living like after we've broken the thing, we're like, okay, well, now we have to fix the thing. And sometimes it's like, no, you just have to let it be broken and then see what else is available. So almost like not jumping the gun. Like if you break something, let it be broken for a minute.
And that gets into the whole, like, the way that how many times we've talked about death and rebirth this month so far, because wow, is like Western American culture so uncomfortable with death, so uncomfortable with letting something pass. Sometimes things have to die, and that's okay. Like, yeah. It gets to be messy and complicated, and yeah.
Well, there's honesty in that, right? There's honesty in something being broken and saying, hey, this is broken, right? I think it's why I'm seeing so many calls lately for, you know, corporate media and like politicians on both sides of the aisle, but especially Democrats and liberals and progressives, to just state how bad things are instead of acting like this is the status quo or like the courts are magically just going to fix things. And again, not to get too in the weeds with politics, but I think there is such relief actually in saying, can you believe how fucked up this is? Can you believe how bad this is? Let's just hold space for things sucking and let it be broken and acknowledge that it's broken instead of trying to pretend like it's fine. There's only so much healing that can happen or progress that can be made or change that can really be implemented when we're not willing to acknowledge how broken something is.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you said relief at some point, in temperance, when you were talking about temperance, Meg, this feeling of the liminal space between death and the devil and being in that, first of all, I wanted to connect it to Thoth. So in the Thoth deck, temperance is art. And I really love that interpretation of it because it feels kind of what I was talking about with the 3. Like, we don't always know where to put our thoughts and feelings, especially in the aftermath of a death. And so if we can channel it into our art, if we can channel it into something that allows us to express all of our feelings in a way that doesn't blow up our lives, you know, that actually results in nourishment and connection and giving voice to something that is universal, but also very personal and specific. I just felt like that was very beautiful and in line for a temperance
I
month.
love that. Yeah. And also tying back to 3, like expressing the thing, letting the thing be born, be made, be out in the world, even if it's not perfect, because it's real and it's true. And that's important.
Yeah.
I
And
love
yeah, it
that.
just speaks also, I think, like to me, Mercury as a writer, as an artist, like Mercury and Venus retrogrades are such amazing times to revisit art that you have put down.
Mhm.
And that
Ooh.
really, there's just I never want to like make everything I say about like for writers, for artists, this is what it is. But that is the primary lens I'm usually thinking of these things through. And Venus and Mercury are incredible times to revisit, to pick up again, to redo, to be like, okay, fuck it. I worked on that novel 4 years ago. I'm just gonna start it over. Like, let's go. But I love that about art as temperance, because I was thinking about how temperance is like medicine for eclipse season.
Mhm.
But also the art is medicine for eclipse season. Like oh my gosh, it's like that line from Rent, right? How like the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation.
Yeah.
And that is so, yeah, that just really, I think, is speaking to me this moment. Yeah.
Totally.
Love it.
And Jeanna, when you were talking about 2011
Mm.
and
Yeah, I
thinking
want to know
about,
what was going on for y'all during that time. I mean, for Meg, I do know what was going on, but
Yeah.
yeah, in as much as y'all are willing to share. Yeah.
yeah, well, so 2011 and kind of I'm so glad that you shared this bookend experience,
Mhm.
because it really felt like, and especially how Neptune is meeting these inner planets of
Hmm.
Mercury and Venus in their retrograde cycle, but also, as Neptune shifts, I think that's all very interesting. It
Yeah.
really gave me like the road not traveled
Mm,
vibe.
yeah.
And so even in your own, like maybe you weren't thinking about queerness at the time that you got married the first time, but it's like you chose the one road, and then in the 14-year cycle, which again, 14 temperance, we have a lot of like, and there's lunations
Mhm.
happening on the 14th. I think 14 is like a big number
This month.
this month, which is really interesting.
That's cool.
And so you might not have been aware of the other path necessarily, but you
Yeah.
took the one, and then in the full cycle, it brought you back to the other, or
Yeah.
at least another road not traveled. So 2011 was the year that I moved to New York and started going to NYU, and I ultimately ended up graduating with a BFA in drama, which I think is hilarious. I'm like, I actually have a degree in dramatics. So, but also in 2011, my road not traveled was to stay in California and study psychology.
Mm.
So I haven't shared this with like anyone because I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm in the process of applying for a graduate program in clinical psychology.
Oh my God, love.
So when you said
Wonderful.
that, I was like, oh my God, it's literally the road not traveled in 2011 is like coming back around in 2025 going, hey, there's nothing wrong with the road that you took.
Yeah.
You are who you are today because you walked down that path.
100%.
And also, like, here's this other thing that at one point you wanted. That was
Hmm.
so like what you were talking about, Gina. Like, it's
Yeah.
something that you wanted. Do you want to do it again? Like, and
Yeah.
to me, not only based on like what I'm going through, but just in general, I feel like that's a juicy invitation
Mm,
into like it's never too late to walk another
yes.
path. It's never too late to change direction. And so I'm excited to hear what Meg thinks, but also just for everyone. I have like little chills right now. I'm like, oh,
That's
I
so
hope the coven
cool.
goes in cool directions.
Yeah. I think there's something, sorry, I'm jumping in before Meg jumps in,
No, it's
but
all
I
good.
think there's something to what you're saying with like, it's never too late, which again, speaking against like white supremacist, Western American specific culture, the idealization of youth and the valorization of like the prodigy of youth is such I mean, sure, but like we continue to age and we have many deaths and rebirths along the way. And I feel like this astrology really speaks to you get to meet yourself many times over. You get to recreate yourself many times over in the course of a life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I have such a cute story. I'm trying to think, like, because I have, because I don't think I have such a neat, like, those are both such cool, like beginning and endings. In 2011, I'd been married for a couple years already, and I was finishing my graduate program. I have a master's degree in gastronomy, which is like food studies and food cultural ways. And I was teaching myself photography, and we were preparing to move to Europe for 4 months for my now ex-husband to do a job swap. We did like an apartment swap job thing. And lived in Budapest for 4 months. So politically, it feels like there's some ties there, but that I'm not going to get into. But like thinking about what I'm doing now, which is very, preparing to like jumping back into my devil book, which is really heavily research based. And the last time I was doing research on this level was while I was in my grad program. But I'm not sure I have such a neat and tidy, story. I feel like I should have gone first. But yeah, I'm just thinking about what else there might be.
But also it doesn't have to be neat and tidy.
Yeah, I don't have a cute story, I don't think.
with the messy middle. And it's not like my marriages like lap perfectly onto the transit, because like we got married in January, like and that kind of thing. But like I don't know, I think that even what you're saying with like you're turning the intellectual Meg like up to an 11 in a way that hasn't happened, just because grad school breaks your brain, and writing certain kind of books will break your brain, and the fact that even that is a return except to something that you're now choosing. And now, and also like where were you in like your deconstruction then?
That's what I was trying to figure out. And I was like, I don't know. It's not neat lines, because I didn't have like a really dramatic severing with the church or anything. It was kind of just drifting off. But yeah, I don't think anything significant had happened yet. It took me a few more years to kind of break away from that. I was really deep in. So I'll have to go back and look at what else was happening. But I graduated from my program at the end of 2011, and then in January of 2012 is when we moved to Budapest. So like it was very like right at the start of 2012. Yeah.
I love Budapest. I didn't know you lived there. That's very cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. Yeah, it was my first time in Europe, and we moved there and lived there for 4 months. So I was like, we got to go everywhere we can. We had no money, but I was like, we got to go everywhere we can. So lots of like cheap Ryanair flights, like bopping around to any place we could, all the hotel points we had, like just everything. It was great.
I think Budapest is actually kind of a cool city to think about in this moment of like temperance, Neptune, whatever. Budapest has been taken over by any empire, like Hungary in its history, like any empire that came to power took Budapest. It was like, it's like the city that cannot hold its own. And yet the people, I'm so sad for it. But like, and then the city itself is really cool because like Buda is one side and Pest is the other side of the Danube. And it's like, they're very different vibes. But the people of Budapest have made art and magic and community expression out of what has fallen in a way that might be really cool to think about in the coming months. Like there are these huge, they used to be communist government buildings that are now empty. And the people have taken them back over and created these dance clubs out of them. And they didn't have any money for decoration. So when you go in, you'll see like a whole wall of like just the screens of old televisions, or like there's a whole car in one. And they all have like different rooms with different DJs. And then there's a
I call them ruin pubs. They're wild.
Yes, the ruin pubs. They're so cool. Wow. And then there's also a park that's about an hour outside of the city, but you can get to it by city transit bus. And it's called Memorial Park. Basically, they took all of the communist statues out of the city center and put them all in this park. So you can actually tour and walk amongst the ruins of communism.
Wow.
And your fee to do that supports the city in whatever new evolution. We can also cut this, but I'm a big fan of Budapest.
No, I think this is I
think it's cool. And like, I was like, there's so much, we could talk about Budapest forever. It's the most,
Yeah.
it's an incredible city. It's so strange and beautiful. And there's so many like hidden pockets of what the fuck, why are these things next to each other? Like, it's a wild place. It was very cool to live there, especially having it be my first experience in Europe because I didn't know anything. My husband was working all the time, so I mostly was alone, walking around, taking pictures and learning to speak just enough Hungarian to buy a chicken at the market so that I could go home and like learn how to cook it and like with Hungarian spices and like following recipes that I didn't know. And it was a rough experience in a lot of ways. My mental health was not in a good place, but it was a really formative experience as well. So, and yeah, we can cut all of this or we can keep it. But
we aren't cutting it. I love things that come up organically through. This is why I love these conversations. It's like this is such an organic connection that none of us could possibly have planned for, and yet look at this metaphor, art, all of it.
Budapest was also the first place I ever did ecstasy.
Sure. Yeah. It's the first place I went to a strip club. So, know, it's really an important place.
Which are also profoundly Neptunian experience. Like a strip club is a liminal space. I will hear no argument about it. Like it is a liminal space that exists like outside of time.
Yeah.
And drug use is very associated with Neptune, especially Neptune and Pisces, low key. So
doing great.
Beautiful. Budapest it is.
Cheers.
Have a meeting in Budapest 2020 question mark.
I'm down.
Yeah.
Cool. Should we get into some cauldrons?
Let's do our cauldrons.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like our cauldrons are going to be very full this month. Okay. For numbers, for finances. Oh, I hate that we're starting here. Okay. I literally wrote down, I'm worried about our finances.
Now that it was like, oh no.
But it's okay. It's not in a way that feels fatal or anything. But again, like we're dealing with trickster magic. So it feels like, and this is something that literally happened to me. It's like you buy the little treat and then a bill comes that you weren't expecting immediately after. Like, so decisions you make will then trigger something else happening. So the practical magic for that, or the practical advice for this kind of vibe is to get your paperwork in order. So I'm not going to go into specifics, your situation, but just be aware of March 31st as a deadline. However, I think we can bump that up to the end of the zodiacal year. So maybe lop off a week or so, but it really feels like getting your affairs in order and paying attention to things before the end of the zodiacal year will be really key for finances this month, because avoidance also has a cost. You might just not know what it is yet. So we're adulting this month.
We're adulting about our money.
Yeah.
And that is just especially true for my Leo risings and Pisces risings, who are really getting their money hammered by the eclipses. Again, not in a fatalistic way, just in a proceed with caution. Like, this area has yellow tape around it. Like, just be extra careful. For Leo risings, I especially want to caution about money that you share with other people or are borrowing or are lending, because the Virgo eclipse lands, which is March 14th, that lands in your second. That impacts that indicates that something is coming to fruition, whether it's a bill coming due or a paycheck alternately coming due. It can really be either one. That's helpful. Probably it's closing out a cycle with money, resources, finances for you. But Saturn is involved in this lunation, and like Saturn is opposing that moon from the 8th house. And when I see Saturn in the 8th, it's like with the constriction of resources you thought you could tap, that it's not even that they aren't available. It's just there are more restrictions, more limits. It's going to be slower to come. So just be extra mindful around money that you would qualify as like a shared resource for that. And then March 29th, the Aries eclipse is really highlighting money for Pisces risings. So and especially since Mercury retrograde is going to be in Aries at that time, like involved in this lunation, just make sure you are double, triple checking any fine print contracts, anything like that. Making sure that like the amount of money you intended to Venmo someone is the amount. It's like 500, not 5,000. We're just, making extra sure that we are being precise and that we're slowing down enough to be precise. So
that is very interesting because the card I pulled for us is actually the Six of Cups, which is usually like a very sweet card.
yeah.
I think it can be really tied to simplicity and childlike joy and fond memories and community care and like reciprocal love and caretaking. So in the realm of finances and resources, I literally wrote, this is giving me, you can have a little treat energy. But I did write like, it's not necessarily about you justifying a massive splurge, but I think it is about paying attention to how the things that you're treating yourself to really make you feel. And like, is this satisfying? Is this bringing a little bit of wonder? Is this bringing a little bit of joy? Is this bringing a little bit of delight? Are you tending your inner child if you do inner child work? But because 6 is so reciprocal and is so much about shared resources or the exchange of resources, maybe your little treat supports a small business or supports a local artist or, is just something small that delights you, but is also 100% going to make a small business owner's whole day when they see that email pop up in their inbox. So if you're going to treat yourself, do it thoughtfully and do it through via someone who's really going to notice and take their own joy from that purchase.
I think the Six of Cups too, not to jump in, but I think that really like what's coming through with you saying all of that, Meg, is like the mutual aid of it all.
Yeah.
Like the strength of mutual aid and leaning into that this month, even as we are maybe feeling the pockets like constrict a little bit, we're still supporting each other. Like
Yeah, spending that same $50 around and around.
Truly passing it around and shit. But just
going
the
to a
same
market and
Venmo.
buying a $5 handmade bracelet by someone who's going to be so excited to sell you that $5 handmade bracelet. It doesn't have to cost a lot of dollars to have an impact on you and to have an impact on the person who made it. I think that that's just such a joyful, lovely thing to think about this month. So
yeah.
Okay, the good news about home and numbers is that 3 has big cozy vibes in March.
Cozy. Good.
Maybe it's because a small groundhog said that we would have 6 more weeks of winter, but it does feel like where March doesn't feel like a bridge from one thing to the other, like at least not to me. It feels more like a shove over the line, like, we're here and now we're there. But I do feel like the prolonged winter vibe is there until towards the end of the month, looking at the zodiacal new year and the end of Q1 as like, okay, now we're off to the races, but March still has kind of incubator vibe. So it feels like the final moments in the cocoon before we bust out of it. But really for home, and this could be a physical place, this could be other people, relationships that feel like home. This could even be feeling at home within your own body. But it really feels like home as respite, home for a space for recovery and recentering, coming back to yourself, feeling really cozy and good and safe, because I think that's really important. So for March and home, we are ditching FOMO for JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. So we're kind of hermiting. It's a great time for spells around the home as well, especially as we get towards that zodiacal new year and end of the month, like any kind of clearing or cleaning spells, probably a combination of mundane and magical really feels like it. But yeah, great time for like really making a home and letting it nourish you.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, Bea, because for Gemini risings, the Virgo eclipse lands in your 4th house of home and family and roots and heritage. And to me, the Virgo eclipse has big spring cleaning vibes. So I'm looking at my Gemini rising wife who will probably be laid up in surgery recovery at that point. But
100%.
it's going to be, so I'm like making a personal mental note to myself to be like, hey, Meg might be a little stir crazy around this time.
Almost
Like,
certainly, yes.
let's be ready to rearrange some furniture, rearrange the vibe. Spring cleaning for Gemini risings. And for Capricorn risings, the Aries eclipse on March 29th is landing in your fourth house of home. So we are initiating change, right? Like maybe you start to think about moving. Maybe you start to think about moving just furniture around your house. Maybe who you think of as family is in for a little bit of a major shift. Mercury retrograde is also here in Aries at the end of the month again. So Capricorn risings, be extra, extra mindful of miscommunications, misunderstandings, dropped texts, leaving folks on red with family or roommates or other people who are in and out of your house.
Yeah, the card is also kind of right in line with what you both are saying. I pulled the Five of Cups. Now, the Five of Cups often gets kind of flattened into just being a card about heartbreak or grief or loneliness. But remember that five is the messy middle. It's change and breakthroughs and moving through something. And Cups is our suit of like feelings and emotions and relationships and connections. So while you might find yourself just navigating loneliness and grief, that could be a thing that comes up for you in your home life this month. I like to expand this card because I think it just gets really pigeonholed in a way that's not always very useful. So if you've been keeping some feelings hidden or locked up, especially when it comes to your roommates or the people that you live with, or if you've been reluctant to engage with your own difficult emotions around your literal house, again, like if things have been feeling literally stagnant within you in the home of your body and you in your physical environment, this is the moment to make some change. Move through that instead of continuing to just stuff all of that down. Engage with those feelings and those desires really intentionally. Acknowledge what might have been struggling to break through, share it with the people you share space with, and you might find some really necessary release and healing and literal clearing through that process. You might be able to talk about what's been in the air and actually find some relief on the other side of that instead of just living in that stagnancy.
Gina, how long is Mars? Oh, hey, 1111. What's up?
Hey.
How long is Mars in Cancer?
Mars is in Cancer the whole month, which I'm going to mention in the health bucket. But yeah, Mars is direct in March, but it sure is in Cancer the whole month.
That's kind of like what the bottling feelings and like letting
100%.
them out made me think of is like once Mars goes direct, you're going to have to cry it out.
Yeah. Well, and the tower being Dare and the tower being connected to Mars as well, it does feel very like sometimes you just gotta let the breakthrough happen so that you can get to the other side of it.
Yeah. Well, as someone who cries and then feels better, I am here to tell you, try it.
Catharsis.
All right. So I think for numbers and love in March, we're back to the tricky end of the spectrum. I think 3 is a really tricky number for love in general. It's a bit like spinning plates, kind of has the vibe of 3 and love. It's like being stretched too thin, trying to keep all these different relationships at top of mind. So then all of them kind of fall through the cracks. Like it just kind of has that vibe. Kiss is your mantra for love in the month of March. And that means keep it simple, stupid. So say what you mean what you say. Again, don't play games. Don't beat around the bush. Clarity is kindness, even if it doesn't feel like it in the short run. And just like Meg was saying about home, home's relationships as well, so
it feels kind of in that porous place.
Totally. So in your relationships, really try and address things head on in March and then keep your side of the street clean. You can't control others. You can only control yourself. And I just think that's something to keep in mind in March.
Yeah, Venus literally is retrograde the whole month of March. Station's retrograde the 1st, still is retrograde on the 31st. So, and Venus retrograde to me, especially if we're thinking about love and intimate relationships, partnerships, it's really about taking responsibility for how we are acting in those partnerships. It's a big time for accountability, for checking in with ourselves around what we do and do not want, how we are or are not acting on what we want. And like I think what B said, like clarity is kindness. It's kindness to yourself. It's also kindness to other people who are involved in the messy middle. March 27th is the day that Venus retrograde in Pisces is conjunct, aka right next to, aka kissing Neptune for the last time. And this is super romantic for folks. I've talked about this before. It's super romantic for folks in committed relationships, I think. Like it's a really nice, like, you know, piercing through the drudgery and getting a little bit back into that, like, you know, fuzzy, newly in love feeling. Venus with Neptune is very love bomby for new connections, so be mindful. Also, though, I will say March 27th, a great time to make art about love. If you're writing a rom-com, you need to write a spicy sex scene. This is the day to do it, baby.
Oh my gosh, should we host a like smutty writing session on 327?
Yes.
I
Yes.
love that
Even if I
idea.
can't be there, just knowing you were
Right.
doing it would make me so happy. From bed, I'm like, read the smut.
I love it. I love it. Although in Pisces, the thing is that like Venus, Neptune in Pisces, Venus, Neptune in Aries conjunctions are going to be spicy, spicy, spicy.
Mhm.
Venus, Neptune in Pisces is like very tantric. We are one, like our consciousness, like in Baldur's Gate 3, when Gale like has astral sex with Mystra, his goddess. That's what Venus, Neptune. I can't believe I said that. I don't
Wow. I pulled a card for us. I actually love that you both mentioned kissing because I pulled the Ace of Cups and I pulled it from the Slutist Tarot, which literally shows a person kissing their reflection in the mirror. So I was like, y'all, killing it. Everybody's doing so good. So this month, because we're talking about the Ace and the number 1, it could be a really beautiful beginning in terms of a new relationship, romantic or otherwise. But it could also just be about beginning to acknowledge something that you've been dreaming about in terms of your, you know, fantasy partner or a friend or the business relationship you've been dreaming about. This doesn't necessarily have to be a I'm meeting the person, but it could be starting to be like, wow, I would love to meet this kind of person, or I would love to deepen my connection with someone like this. But because this Slutist Tarot literally shows someone kissing their own reflection in the mirror, which I just think is the cutest fucking version of this card, I do want to invite you to think about the self-love practices that you may have, or the ways that you talk to and treat yourself, a la the Knight of Coins, the Knight of Pentacles that we were talking about earlier about loving your body and showing yourself love and compassion. Are you as kind? This is a read for all of us. Are you as kind and compassionate and loving towards yourself as you are towards your friends or partners? What would it feel like to make a point of speaking graciously to yourself this month, to showering yourself with compliments, or to literally kiss your reflection in the mirror?
Couldn't be me.
I know, but it's a thing I struggle with, so I'm just putting it out there. Like, this could be a month for actually like showing yourself all the loving kindness that you would also love for a partner to show you, or that you would also like to be showing to a partner, whether you are partnered or not. So,
All right. Well, speaking of March and health, yeah, 3 is a huge communicator number. And I know Mercury is going to be wilding out, but I think March is a really good month for communicating with your care team. And that can mean a lot of different things. It could mean literal doctors, it could mean healing arts practitioners, acupuncturists, massage therapists, tarot readers, psychics. It also means therapists, psychiatrists, friends, family, other caretakers. You know, if somebody's giving you a ride to the doctor's office, they're on your care team. So I think communicating clearly with whoever your care team is. I thought about this when you talked about the Knight of Pentacles, Meg. Like, what would it be like to think of the Knight as a train that's already moving? And then, you know, you're meeting new caretakers, but you're like, hey, you got to read the chart because this is a train that's already in motion. And, you know, we're willing to look up and look at another option, but you have to come prepared to like be on this train.
We're already moving. Are you joining us, or don't get in the way?
Yeah, so that feels very much the vibe in March. And again, if you don't have a care team, this might be the month where like Avengers assemble, you know, and things start to come together in ways that are very serious, and then also in ways that are not very serious. You know, like this is not I'm not only speaking to the chronically ill here at this point. But may our communications be clear, precise, and lead us into new and more exact answers, treatments, care plans. And then, like I said earlier, I do think because 3 is a mental number and there's just a lot of turmoil happening in public, but also in private, I think mental health could really be highlighted. So, again, this might be the month that you get a new therapist. This might be the month that you decide you need to go back on medication. On the flip side, maybe you're like, I'm feeling good and I want to go off medication. I would say just consult with a doctor and do it in a way that's going to disrupt your life and your brain the least, but I do think mental health will be highlighted in March.
Yeah, we're still taking it slow in March. Like, even in as much as we're starting, it's like a ship doing a 20-point turn. Like, we're starting to move toward more action, starting to witness some energetic change in the air and the ether. We're still going slow. Mars is direct, but it's still in Cancer, which also then means that Mars is answering to the moon. The moon is having eclipses this month. So we're just being so slow, being very gentle. It's very easy to boom and bust during an eclipse cycle, which is just to say, like, rest, hydrate, nourish, make sure you're taking care of that end of the spectrum. Things are starting to pick up. So I'm not going to say, like, don't do things, don't go out. You can still be going out, doing things, making moves, but just you need the ballast of rest to this month. And this is really not a month where the recovery from burnout is easy. Not that it ever is, but like, there's just less resilience available to us this month. So build it in. It's like the whole, you know what? I forget, my train of thought is done. Okay, I'm done.
Speaking of moving slowly, I did pull the Hermit as our card for health for this month. And the Hermit is famously not a particularly fast moving archetype. But I really think about this as representing trusting yourself and relying on your lived experience. You are not new. And I was just thinking about this idea that you are the expert when it comes to your own body. It's really easy to have doctors gaslight us or to get stuck relying on bad internet advice or WebMD instead of literally trusting in our own bodies and our own experience. But you know what it feels like to live in your body better than anyone else possibly could. So as you're communicating with your care teams and being as honest as possible about what you need, pay attention to how you feel. It just keeps coming up. Like, validate your body, validate your experience instead of downplaying your pain or denying your needs or pretending that you're not craving something that you're actually craving. And if you need to, again, listen to our conversation on chronic illness and spirituality if you haven't, because even if you don't consider yourself disabled or chronically ill, even if you are a shining beacon of health that inspires all of us on a daily basis, you're still probably going to find some nuggets of wisdom, because we talk a lot about taking care of your body and using your own, paying attention to your own capacity when it comes to spiritual practice. So that felt like potentially really helpful medicine for folks this month as well.
Yeah, also because we talk a lot about creativity and witchcraft and magical practices, and we've talked a lot today about magic and ritual and art making. And so I think there's really something to be said about all of us honoring where we are and our capacity, and then finding ways to participate in craft or to create under those new parameters. So I think that feels really juicy for health in March.
Yeah, I think there's just something very, very potent about just taking it one day at a time. And as someone, we're recording this mid-February, but I'm scheduled to have major surgery at the end of the month. So as someone who will be spending most of March recuperating and recovering and taking it one day at a time, I am taking a lot of notes on what we're discussing here. So,
all right, March, any final thoughts? I feel like this one was I guess that's good because it's 3, it's communication, but we all came and we are like, we know what we're saying and
we
we're going
know
to
what
say
we're
it.
doing. Yeah.
I am so ready for Q1 to be over. That's what I'm going to say. I am so ready. And I know that March it is the ship doing the 20-point turn. It is the slow catapult, and then the trebuchet goes really fast. So in April. Like, I know that, and I'm sure it's going to feel away, but I'm also just like, Oh man, I'm just craving movement in literally, emotionally, like in my professional life, in so many ways right now that I'm like, let's get going. So I think that I'm also taking the words around going cautiously and
Yeah.
hermiting and all of, I'm taking that to heart.
Yeah.
Because I can feel my own impatience here. Like, and yeah, like Meg said, we're recording this mid-February. So I'm like, ready to fucking go, and the world is not yet, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see where we are and where the world is and where the country is and where what's shifted at the end of March. I think it's gonna, it feels like we're gonna be in a very different
Yeah,
place, whatever all of that might entail, which I think, can be scary, but also I'm hoping that it brings some very necessary disruption and change so that we can be moving in a new direction, with support and community and care.
Amen. Yeah.
So
That's it. All right. Well, March 2025. You can find all of us on the interwebs.
Mhm.
We, as a group, Call Your Coven, we're at callyourcoven.com. You can email us, callyourcoven@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram, at Call Your Coven.
we do still have an Instagram. I do still
Yeah.
post things sometimes.
You do still post it.
Yes. And then, of course, we do have a Patreon. It's still at that $5 supportive tier. But if we are, just thinking about even us saying we should have a smut writing club on the 27th,
Yeah, that's where
any
we go.
group that we do like that will probably start as an offering to our patrons. And then we'll probably have some kind of low or donation based ticketing for those who are not patrons. But patreon.com/call your coven. We're there if you want to help us out. And yeah, Meg, you're going to take a lot of the months to recuperate.
Yeah, I will say that because Jeanna and I have been running the Grove, and because I've been preparing for the surgery, and because I'm writing a book and editing a issue of Rebus and just doing a million things as ever, I'm not planning to release any new classes, at least for a few more months. So if you are someone that's been like, wow, Meg, I love the way you talk about tarot and I'd love to learn more from you, the conservatory is going to be the place that you do that. It is a monthly membership. You can sign up and cancel literally anytime you want, but it gives you access to a huge library of my most popular and robust tarot courses. You can take everything at whatever pace you like and join with community that are doing the same thing. So you can find that on my website at 3amtarot.com. But that's going to be the best place to work with me, if that's something you're interested in, at least for the next few months while I recover.
Jeanna, anything to plug?
Just my newsletter, jeannakadlec.substack.com. It's called Astrology for Writers. I am currently on submission with my next book, so I will probably have a class in March, but my brain can't do that right now because I'm obsessively checking a spreadsheet full of like 23 editors to see if any of them have written us back yet, like a normal person. So
a normal person on submission, that's all you really do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have something? Probably. It'll be announced at the newsletter, so sign up for that.
Great. Yeah, and I'm at the newsletter as well for right now. I actually am super happy writing for the newsletter right now.
Really cool stuff on your newsletter. I love the weekly thing you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to offer, numerology information. I'm doing weekly forecasts, and I've had a lot of fun writing those. They're kind of like different. I'm differently conjured, every week. And that's what I'm jamming out on. And yeah, I'm still in the thick of health stuff. So that's pretty much where I'm focusing my energy and attention. But I do also have a Gumroad shop, which you can purchase some replays from some classes that happened in 2024 around numerology, as well as pick up a little.
Those were so good.
I should have, thank you. I should have plugged this in the chronic illness and spirituality chat. But I have a little grimoire that is, the suggested is $11, but I think it's pay what you can. And it's one spell for every number. It's called Spells for the Spiral. And they're all varying degrees of accessibility, but truly from like sit in a room and visualize this to like grab your favorite tools. So I have a few things, and you can find all of those things on my website at RebeccaScolnick.com. All right. Well, Coven, we love you so much. We will be coming back this month later on with a little conversation for you.
Do we want to tease what that conversation is?
Yeah.
Tease.
Yeah. Coming out of the broom closet.
Mhm.
Yeah. We're going to talk about how to tell people in your life you're a witch.
And how we did it too.
How we did and did not do it.
How we did and did not do it, really.
No, I really am looking forward to that conversation because you both have such juicy stories, and I feel like we haven't really gotten into the soup of any of those experiences for us. So personally looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, same. And then we might have some surprises for you on in March as well. And if you do want a spicy writing cohort of some kind, let us know. We'll ideate.
Yeah.
But until then, just sending everyone a ton of love and magic and gird your loins energy for March. And
comrades.
yes, we'll talk to you soon.
Love y'all.
Bye.